Do you like quarterbacks who can make every throw on the field at all three levels? What about those that can change the game with their legs? What about good culture fits? Jaren Hall from BYU checks all of the boxes. We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Saints, your daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much, as always, making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget, we're free and available on all podcast apps and on YouTube as well. And I'm your host, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter, your New Orleans Saints expert, credential member of the media, CrescentCitySports.com, USA Today's Saints Wire, Tuesdays in Locked On NFL, and here with you every single Monday through Friday, and then some on Locked On Saints. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by BetOnline, where they get more odds, lines, and props than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. On today's episode, we're breaking down BYU quarterback Jaren Hall. We're going to look at three unique aspects around Jaren Hall, why he's a perfect culture and locker room fit for the New Orleans Saints. We'll take a look at where the Saints could draft him. I think he's an ideal mid-round selection for New Orleans. But first, I want to start off with just the blatant statement here. Jaren Hall will be, and certainly should be, an NFL pro. He's good enough, more than good enough, to be an NFL pro, but he's not going to get the same type of recognition as some of these guys are in these kind of like wide open offenses that create a lot of different things for the quarterback. He's coming from BYU, which isn't a place that gets a lot of media coverage, all of that. So he's going to sit comfortably, probably into the mid rounds, and that's amazing for New Orleans, who should be in the quarterback market. So Jaren Hall should be an NFL pro. Here's why from an on-field perspective. 6,174 career passing yards. That's 2 seasons as a starter. He had 420 passing yards a couple years ago, but really the majority of his yardage came from these past 2 seasons. During that time, think about what the New Orleans Saints like, right? They like a quarterback that can attack all 3 levels, great. They also like a quarterback that can take care of the football. 52 career passing touchdowns, has added 9 rushing touchdowns as well, to 11 interceptions. That is nearly a 5-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. That is outstanding. And the New Orleans Saints also like an accurate passer, 65.2% career completion percentage. Jaren Hall has a pro arm, and he is a pro on the field. He's pro off the field as well, but we'll discuss that a little bit later. Want to make sure, it was 9 rushing touchdowns, 800 total rushing yards during his time at BYU as well. So he stayed pretty busy. He makes fantastic throws on the run. He's got insane touch down the sideline, like really good ball placement. And one of the things that I actually really like about Jaren Hall that you're not going to hear a ton about is that he has a high percentage when it comes to low percentage throws to the sideline. Basically, the way that the NFL game looks at passing is that anything toward the sideline is a lower percentage throw to anything over the middle of the field. That's why you see quarterbacks like Jimmy Garoppolo, Andy Dalton, Drew Brees. You see a lot of these NFL quarterbacks make their money going over the middle and attacking the middle of the field. That's why a lot of schemes attack the middle of the field as well. Those are higher percentage throws, lesser opportunities for takeaways, things like that as well. But towards the outside, that's usually the defender zone, right? So for Jaren Hall, when he has such a high percentage on those low percentage throws, including to routes like corner routes, comebacks, and outs, all of those should sound very familiar to you as a Saints fan. He's got a 95 plus NFL pass rating, not a collegiate pass rating, but an NFL pass rating of 95 plus when he's going towards the outside in 2022. That's pretty magnificent. And for the most part, honestly, I said 95 plus because there's one area, which is deep right, that he's got like a 95 point something, but everything else, shallow, short, or behind the line of scrimmage, short, intermediate, left and right sidelines, over 100 with that passer rating. So he's been outstanding in places where you don't expect collegiate quarterbacks to be outstanding. He is fantastic when it comes to both designed and outer structure runs as well. So think about him as a bit of an upgraded yet smaller Taysom Hill in terms of what can happen in the run game, right? So he's not going to run a lot of QB powers for you. He's 6'1", 205 pounds. He's going to have to put on some bulk if you want to start running that offense with him, but he's a better scrambler. He's somebody that has a little bit of a different field vision, and he's someone that is also utilized as a part of the run game at BYU, which is something that the New Orleans Saints could certainly replicate. Laser focused player, phenomenal leadership ability. I'll share a story about that later. He is an older prospect. He'll be 25 years old. I think it's a month before the NFL draft. So some would see that as downside. I like that in terms of maturity, especially at this position. I think the Joe Burrow thing really kind of like got out of hand in terms of, him having, him being a little bit older and all these other things and stuff like that. And look, he could be very well the exception as opposed to the rule. So I don't want to use him as evidence for like not caring about age, but it's something I'm not usually as rocked by, but NFL teams might be. So it's worth also pointing out. And as I mentioned, he takes care of the football. So that's one of the big reasons why he fits in New Orleans. The other ways that he fits in New Orleans is that he's a 3-level passer with mobility, which means that he can fit in just about anywhere. So regardless of what change happens at offensive coordinator, if it is Pete Carmichael again in 2023, which I don't see being the case, if Mike McDaniel gets fired in Miami and the Saints are able to convince him to come to New Orleans, if Frank Reich comes to New Orleans, if they find some, offensive coordinator, no matter who that offensive coordinator is, Jaren Hall is going to fit because, again, 3-level passer, accurate passer, takes care of the football. He does have 13 fumbles, 6 in each of the last 2 years, and then 1 a few years back. So that is something to watch, but doesn't turn the ball over very much. He fumbles the ball, but he doesn't turn it over very much, doesn't throw a lot of interceptions, and he's got the mobility element too, so he'll fit with just about anybody. This is also the type of quarterback that Dennis Allen went after this offseason in Deshaun Watson. They've got similar builds. Like I mentioned, Jaren Hall, 6'1", about 205 pounds. Deshaun Watson, 6'2", about 215 pounds. So you put 10 pounds on Jaren Hall and you've basically got a Deshaun Watson in terms of stature. He's accurate at the collegiate level, just like Watson was. And of course, he is a threat to run the ball. So if you look at sort of the archetype of of Deshaun Watson without all of the off-field issues, you've got Jaren Hall. They're pretty similar in terms of what they do. Now, Deshaun Watson did it at a higher collegiate level against better competition and all of that. So that's something to consider in terms of like what their on-field production looks like. But just in terms of build, play style, and archetype, Jaren Hall, not far from the mold. So the Saints won't have to change up much in their offense in order to cater to Hall. But if they do make changes, it's not a situation where Hall's no longer going to fit. Now, you might want to bring in a veteran quarterback to be in line first so that you can give Hall time to develop. You probably don't want to see him starting week 1 of the 2023 NFL season, but mid-season to late season, there could be opportunities for him, or of course, in 2024. So where could the New Orleans Saints invest in a Jaren Hall? Well, I think that his perfect spot is right where the New Orleans Saints have their selections. We'll break that down as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. Today's episode brought to you by Prize Picks. Our good friends over at Prize Picks. Daily fantasy made the way that it should be. It's you versus the house. No mystery lineups, mystery pots of money, mystery cuts of that money if you win or lose. It's just you, your knowledge, your favorite sport, your favorite players, and that against the house. So if you feel comfortable about your sports knowledge, Prize Picks is a great way to play daily fantasy football. All you have to do, or daily fantasy basketball or baseball, whatever it is that you're into. All you have to do is pick 2 to 5 players, choose whether or not they're going to come in at more or less in their Prize Picks projections. You get those right, you can win up to 10 times your entry back in winnings. And first-time users are going to be able to get a 100% instant deposit match of up to $100 by using the promo code LOCKEDON over at the Prize Picks app or prizepicks.com. Once again, that's promo code LOCKEDON to get that 100% instant deposit match of up to $100. So you put $100 down, they'll match $100. Put down $50, they'll match $50. You know how numbers work. Check them out today at prizepicks.com or the Prize Picks app today. All right, family, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. Appreciate you, as always, making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day, every day. Sometimes your second listen, sometimes your third listen. You know, we out here. We're putting out that content. BYU quarterback Jaren Hall would be an ideal mid-round quarterback selection for the New Orleans Saints. When I say mid-round, I'm talking about picks I'm talking about like rounds like 3, 4, and 5. That's kind of what I'm looking at, right? So that's kind of where I'm looking at for a Jaren Hall. I think for the reasons that I said earlier, right? Age is something that might not factor into me, but it's going to factor into the NFL elite. Him coming from BYU, not really having a lot of media coverage, all those other things. And then, the offense that he worked in wasn't a spectacular offense. He just made it spectacular. So I think that's actually something that should work in his benefit. Now, he will be at the Senior Bowl. He accepted a Senior Bowl invitation. So that's a big opportunity for him to do that. And maybe something else that even draws him a little bit closer to New Orleans as well, because you know how much the Saints love drafting their Senior Bowl prospects. Just a quick reminder. Make sure you check out Locked On Sports today as well within your day. Get all those updates, some really, really good news around DeMar Hamlin, really good stuff. So everything's kind of trending in as positive a direction as it could, though still a long road ahead. So let's take a look at Jaren Hall's draft stock and where the New Orleans Saints fit in and all this, because I think that Jaren Hall's draft stock is going to be impacted by 3 key things. There's size, first of all. He's a little bit undersized for the position, but as we've noted before, it didn't really stop the Saints. It hasn't really stopped the Saints in the past. So I'm not super concerned about that in terms of New Orleans. The second piece is injury history, right? A couple of concussions. He had a season-ending injury in 2020, rib injuries, ankle injury. So it's really the injuries. That's maybe where age does factor in, right? The combination of injury and age. And then number 3 is his progression timeliness. So when I talk about this, which is kind of like a super specific thing to point out, basically the idea is that he processes well, but he just needs to pick up the pace in getting more quickly through his reads. That's something you can address in the NFL. So to address each of these, we've already talked about size and age, but we'll kind of hit those a little bit, but size just doesn't seem to be a major concern for me at all. While I don't see age as a major issue either, age combined with a lengthy injury history is, right? Now, so we've seen over and over again that collegiate injury history does not equal NFL injury history, but we've also seen a number of times that it does. And oftentimes when we see it, you see it because you're a New Orleans Saints fan, and the New Orleans Saints have been plagued by that over the course of the recent past. So to risk that injury to your potential future at the most important position on the field, that's a big risk to take. However, one worth taking if we're talking about a mid-round selection. It's different when we're talking about a round 1 guy, but when we're talking about round 3, 4, 5, you'll take that risk a little bit. I'll discuss that a little bit further here in a moment. Progression timeliness is the one that I really want to dig into because we can kind of move past this pretty quickly. This is something he's going to improve no matter what. Inherently, he has to improve it. And it's not that he has to improve it because if he doesn't improve it, then he won't be an NFL quarterback. It's just that, he's going to be in position to improve it no matter what, because the NFL game inherently moves faster than the collegiate game. So one way or another, whether he likes it or not, or whether he intends to or not, he's going to start moving through those progressions mighty fast, right? That pace is going to pick up one way or another, just as a part of the transition from the collegiate game to the NFL game. So the key here is to not overcorrect and start to get frantic or frenetic in the pocket and start rushing or anything like that. So this is why you probably give him some time to develop in the background before getting some run as a potential starter would be a smart run. That would be a smart idea, right? So that's why you bring in maybe the veteran quarterback that can kind of lead the offense while he develops in the background. So you develop this, and then maybe you add on a little bit of bulk, right? We're talking about him being undersized, 6'1", 205 pounds. You can maybe bulk him up he's 6'1", 205 pounds. So you maybe bulk him up to 6'1", 210, 215 pounds, and then all of a sudden that ends up also having a factor, right? Because if that development time happens and you bulk up, then that helps with the injury history as well. It distances him from the previous injuries that he suffered in college before he hits an NFL field. And if you bulk him up, then it also ends up helping him with his play style. You also do just like you did with Taysom Hill and teach him not to take so many hits. Teach him to slide, teach him to run out of bounds, teach him to fight for another down, all of those other things. It was a nice little rhyme. Bars, doing it again. And if you taught Taysom Hill that, who is stubborn as all get out when it comes to that idea, not actually stubborn, but dude welcomes contact. He loves it, right? Like it's a part of his game. But the Saints talked him into it last year. They're like, hey, you got to slide, homie. Like you got to protect yourself every now and then. So if you can do that with him, you're definitely going to be able to do that with a guy like Jaren Hall. So I don't see these as enough of a concern to not invest in him in the mid rounds. And this is where I think it makes the most sense for the Saints to take, I wouldn't even call it a flyer, but take a shot on him, right? You're okay with taking a risk, especially when it comes to a game-changing talent or potential like Jaren Hall. I mean, this guy changes the way that your game is played because of all of the different things that he can do everywhere on the field. And if it doesn't work, then what? You burned a third or a fourth round selection. It's not that big of a deal. But I have higher hopes for Jaren Hall. And part of the reason why I have higher hopes for him is because of his personality, who he is as a human being. So I want to make sure that we highlight that. I had a fun time highlighting that about Max Duggan. I think recent events have taught us that we should be appreciating these people as opposed to just what they do on the field. So what are some of the stories that make Jaren Hall a perfect fit for the New Orleans Saints locker room and a perfect fit for their culture? I'll tell you as we wrap up today's episode of Locked On Saints. And today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by BetOnline, your number one source for all of your sports wagering needs. You can find all the odds, lines, and props that you're looking for Week 18 for the New Orleans Saints, end of year awards, coaching props and odds as well. And that's just the NFL. There's so much more over on the NBA side, the MLB side, the NHL. There's so many different things for you to check out. So you can get in on all that action. You know, you like that sweat, you like that fun. It's all the more fun when you got a little bit of Skrilla riding on it. So you can get in on all of that action over at BetOnline today. You can find it on your mobile device, your laptop, your desktop, whatever it is that you use to browse the internet over at betonline.net. They got odds, lines, props, news, scores, articles, podcasts. I know you like sports podcasts. They got sports podcasts for you as well, including the fastest and easiest way to keep up with everything going on around the trends and action in the betting world. They got you covered. They got you covered as they always do, just like they got us covered. So we appreciate you, BetOnline, and we hope that you enjoy betonline.net as well, where the game starts. Let's get it. Who Dat Nation, wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Saints with our closing look at BYU quarterback Jaren Hall, a prospect I'm really, really excited about. Now, this is just our first look. We'll continue to break him down just like we will with Hendon Hooker and Max Duggan. We'll look at Tanner McKee. We'll look at Sam Hartman. We'll look at a bunch of different quarterbacks and a bunch of different players over the course of this offseason. But this is just kind of our starting point right now with Jaren Hall. And one of the things that I want to make sure that I discuss is like Jaren Hall as a human being. Jaren Hall would be a perfect fit for the New Orleans Saints locker room and culture. There are a couple of things to consider here. First of all, he's an LDS member. There are several LDS members on the New Orleans Saints roster, at least at this time. That's not me saying that like, oh, well, they should just draft every Mormon out there. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is that like you're bringing a player into a locker room where there are people coming from similar backgrounds, similar systems of belief, all those other things. That universality, that connection is important, right? Having that connection is important. And a lot of other guys connect on a bunch of different things. This is just one of those things that's unique that could easily connect him to some of the other players that are in the building. And the other thing is that he's a remarkably high character guy. I want to give you a couple of stories about like kind of this young signal caller and the way that he has demonstrated his high character, kind of like what we discussed with Max Duggan. I had such a good time discussing that. So I want to do that with Jaren Hall as well. So let me tell you the story about when he went on his mission trip, because the reason why he's going to be a little bit older as a quarterback prospect is because the first 2 years that he spent at BYU, instead of playing football, he actually went on his mission trip. And so he kind of chose to forego opportunities to play football to go and do for him what was kind of his calling, right? It was his mission. So he goes out, he goes to Northern California to serve his mission, and he's about to knock on a door along with the companion that he has for that mission, and a woman yells from across the street that her purse had just been stolen, and they can see the guy that stole the purse running away. So the companion, he and his mission companion have already knocked on the door, right? And so they just kind of bail. They jump into the car that they were using at that time, and they drive to kind of follow and track where this burglar goes. And lo and behold, goes down an alleyway, jumps a fence into a backyard, and the backyard happened to be the backyard of the place where Jaren Hall and the companion on his mission were staying. So they stayed out, called the police, had the police show up. Police showed up, took care of the guy, got the purse back to the lady. We don't know if he was arrested or what the police did, but that's a whole thing. But Jaren Hall was kind of like, I don't want anything, don't want my name in the paper, don't want anything. I just want to get back to my appointment, right? Because he had an appointment on that mission to go and speak to somebody. And so then they just dipped from the scene. Like, the scene was taken care of, everything was fine. The lady got her purse back, and they just went back to the appointment. Basically said, sorry, we're stopping this guy who robbed this lady and everything. And I love that story because I think it just shows you a couple different things. Like, he didn't want recognition for it, nor did his companion. They chose to help somebody when they could have just ignored it, and they could, he's too far away or whatever, right? Like, there's so many different ways. It reminds me of the Malik Willis combine story, in which Malik Willis was walking through the streets of Indianapolis after, a combine day, and there was an unhoused woman and her son on the street, and he stopped and gave them clothes. He said, he was like, I don't have any money, but he just opened up his bag and just started pouring clothes out for this woman. And so, like, that is something that was like the talk of the combine. And I think that, like, this kind of fits that same mold in terms of, like, your ability to not say no and to make the decision to go and help someone. I think that that's important. The other piece was an on-field story that I want to tell. And this one comes down to, I believe it was back in September, the game between a then-ranked BYU going up against a then number 9 in the country, Baylor. So this was an opportunity for them to knock off a top 10 team, all that. So at the end of regulation, they're tied 20-20 with Baylor. The kicker goes out to kick what would be the game-winning field goal. They had gotten backed up on a holding penalty to the 44-yard line. Jaren Hall completes like a 30-something yard pass, and then that sets them up for a 35-yard field goal. And the kicker goes out. He misses the field goal. No big deal. They don't lose the game because of it. They were tied, so they go to overtime. Baylor doesn't score in their first possession of overtime. And the way that, and so that means that BYU wins with a field goal or a touchdown. They run a few plays. They march the kicker back out there. Good call by the coach to show more belief in the kicker. 37-yard field goal. He misses it again. And so now the way that those kind of double overtime, now they're going to double overtime, the rules kind of change. You've got to score a touchdown or whatever. And if you score a touchdown, you got to go for 2 points. And that basically ends up keeping the LSU Texas A&M thing from not happening anymore. And so they score a touchdown. They don't get the 2-point conversion. So it's up to the BYU defense to finish off Baylor and get this top 10 win. And where is Jaren Hall on the sideline during that defensive possession? He's on a knee along with that kicker. He's with him the entire defensive possession. And the moment that a couple of false start penalties back up Baylor, they're at a 4th and goal on the 11-yard line. The BYU defense gets the stop. And the moment that happens, Jaren Hall just hugs him, just embraces him. High character guy, high quality character. This is something that the New Orleans Saints care about. These stories matter when it comes to the draft process. And so we've eliminated that he's, excellent on the field and that he deserves to be a pro quarterback. He's got a pro quarterback arm. He's got pro quarterback touch. He's got pro quarterback legs, that high floor player. But he's also a high floor person, human being. And I think if we learned nothing at all or if we learned anything at all from this week, the one thing that we should know is that it matters to acknowledge these people as human beings. And I think Jaren Hall, as a human being and as a player, is absolutely deserving of a New Orleans Saints draft pick if the Saints don't invest in a quarterback earlier, right? If they get in position and they're in the second round and Hendon Hooker's there and they really like him, or maybe they really like Max Duggan and he raises his draft stock over the course of the season, or maybe Jaren Hall gets drafted by somebody else, totally fine. But like, if you're on the board in the 3rd round and you've addressed a major position, if you're the New Orleans Saints, you grabbed an edge rusher, you got a great running back to pair up with Alvin Kamara, quarterback needs to be where you're looking next. And if Jaren Hall's on the board, the New Orleans Saints should absolutely go back to that BYU pool of players. I could see it absolutely happening. So that's my thoughts on Jaren Hall. Really enjoyed breaking him down. Really loved watching his tape and just watching him play. If you get a chance, just like go and watch even just the highlights or whatever, but like watch the tape too. just a remarkable player and super fun to watch. He's, like I said, he's got some things to improve upon. Size, stature aren't things that he can necessarily improve upon, but those are going to be things that are going to ding him. Age, he can't change that, but those are things that are going to ding him. And then the progression stuff that we talked about. But all of those are things that either teams are going to be comfortable with or not comfortable with addressing. And particularly that progression timeliness, you're going to work through that one way or another in the NFL because you ain't got a choice. The game moves faster. All right, y'all. Enjoy your weekend. Our next episode will be the live postcast episode from the Caesars Superdome as we close out the end of the New Orleans Saints 2022 NFL season. So we'll have the live postcast as well as, of course, the full Monday episode for you that will come out Monday morning as well. And then we're back to one-a-days just for next week, just so I can catch my breath after the season. I'm sure we'll do some end-of-year press conferences and stuff like that. So I'll bring you all of that as well as, of course, Black Monday, which will follow the Saints' final game. And where are the positions that are opening up for coaching and how does that impact New Orleans? There's so much that we're going to be able to track all throughout the very, very exciting and unique New Orleans Saints offseason on the way. Appreciate you as always for making me your first listen of the day here on Locked On Saints. Make sure you go and check out Locked On Sports today too. Go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with the Locked On local experts on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Appreciate y'all as always. Making me part of your day, part of your routine for saying yes to me and the show. As always, if you see me, say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints, make sure you follow me on Twitter at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you living. Let me know how you momming them. And trust Who Dat Nation. I'll holla at you.